He spent over 40 years in the banking world, and yet here he is, over 60 years old, and stepping fully into a life that brings him joy.
Life begins where the comfort zone ends. You know, putting yourself out there, if you're just purely living in the comfort zone, you're not really exploring what life is truly about. There's a lot of triggers out there in the world today that will awaken people, and I think this is part of the journey that's unfolding over 2025 definitely. We've been conditioned and programmed to believe governments, for health authorities, for corporate entities, and we need to consume this and we need to consume that, and we need pharmaceutical drugs to get our bodies back online.
Today, I have the pleasure of hosting a truly inspiring guest who I've discovered through, I would call it intuition, because it just one day there was a video that popped up on my YouTube and I clicked the video without looking at the numbers, without looking at the subscribers. It wasn't something that I clicked because there was an agenda behind it. It was something that I clicked because it called me. And once I watched the video, I realized that the channel was quite small, but the message that was behind it really touched me in my core. And there's just certain people that you meet that immediately touch your soul. And so that is what I felt when I discovered Elevated Planet. And so today I have one of the hosts, one of the people who created Elevated Planet with me, and I'm incredibly excited about it because it speaks to something I believe so many of us wrestle with, and that is fear of pursuing our dreams and the belief that we've somehow missed our chance. So my guest today is John Drew, a man who is proving that it's never too late to do that, to do what you're truly passionate about. He spent over 40 years in the banking world, navigating the complexities of finance and stability, and yet here he is, over 60 years old, and stepping fully into a life that brings him joy. His journey is a powerful reminder that age, societal expectations, or even decades spent in one field don't have to define the rest of your life. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Steven. I'm really so grateful for you having reached out to me. Yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and you know, this is part of the joy, really, having, as you say, spent over 40 years in the finance industry and banking, and but I think everything happens for a reason, you know. And I think I was supposed to go through that very left brain existence for a long time. And I was very fortunate because, yeah, my travels took me off to, you know, I spent about 11 years working in out of California, but covering a lot of America for what I was doing. And also because it was very much global banking, what it meant is that I got exposed to a lot of different cultures. And
Mhm.
that was a real advantage. I think that's the reason I was supposed to do it, because what it kind of taught me is that having had a bit of diversity in life like that and exposures to different people with different ways of thinking, is that it taught me that my version of reality was a version of reality, not the version of reality.
Mhm.
And it kind of like opened my mind then, because I got to meet a lot
Mhm.
of people who I had a lot of respect for, who thought about the world in a very different way to the way I thought about the world. And
Mhm.
my mind opened as a result of that. Um, but I was very left brain there because it was all numbers, it was risk, and it was capital markets and risk assessments and stuff like that for corporates around the world. But at the same time, I got to meet a lot of really lovely people and had a lot of fun with it. But there reached a point where I felt all of a sudden it's like the joy left it. It just something
Mhm.
changed. And it was really interesting actually because When I did have, we call it a numerology type of reading actually with somebody who's now a friend. But what that actually showed me is that there are certain times in your life where things change and they're meant to change. And I could
Hmm.
identify when Chris said to me, he said, "Oh, yeah, this year is the year when you will have found things change." Now, it took a while to change because I enjoyed my job to that point. I was well paid. So I had no real reason to change because what was I going to do if I didn't do that? And so, but I kind of look back and you realize things happen for a reason. And
Hmm.
then ultimately, yeah, that something happened that switched me pretty much out of my left brain existence and more becoming more heart based. And there was something very specific that happened, and that began this journey to kind of explore the more of the right brain, but the spirituality side of things as well. And yeah, it's I suppose one of the advantages of the more advancing years is the fact that financially it can give you more freedom because you can kind of that day job where you're working like ridiculous hours a week and traveling and all this kind of thing, you can kind of put that to one side and explore what you feel driven to do as opposed to what you have to do to keep the bills paid, etc., etc. So I don't think there's any accidents out there. And I'm very grateful, Stephen, as well, to you explaining why you reached out because it's interesting actually because I've had a fair number of people in recent months who've said things that have been very similar. And it said that for some reason this just popped out up randomly on their feed and they came to look at it and then they explored it and then they liked it and then they got in touch and now they're part of our community, which is growing, which is lovely. I mean, my knowledge of social media is barely existent, right? Seriously. I've had to learn a lot along the way. And I'm very grateful, Stephen, because when we were talking the other day, you gave me some really useful pointers. But it's not built on the fact that, trying to achieve popularity through these external means of, but at the same time, I do want to reach people. And Jole as well, my business partner and my soulmate on this journey. Jolie, I mean, I feel we make a really good team,
Hmm.
purely because I'm the ex-left brainer who's left the mainstream not that long ago. And she's the one who's been steeped in spirituality because of who
Yeah.
she is for decades. So she comes at it from a very different angle and is
Mm.
able to apply spiritual tools and talk to our soul architecture, for instance, which kind of would
Mm.
have meant nothing to me. I had no idea what a chakra was, never mind anything else, right? So the journey has
Yeah,
been
it's very
accept.
common knowledge now. It's very common knowledge. Like things have changed. Things have radically changed. I mean, like when you say chakra, I'm also like, I have no idea what a chakra is. And here comes Dr. Joe Dispenza, who literally tells us that how our physical body is has evolved and how there are certain areas in the body which are very, very important, and how these have certain excretions of hormones, and how they work also with our emotions, and just how the physical body works. And it's just amazing how the number of chakras that they are, as many secretions they are, and and so it's beautiful how now science is merging with spirituality. But I understand what you're saying because you spent over 40 years being identified with a version of you that you thought was real, that you thought was there's no other person that you could be. And so now that you step into something that you could have never imagined, you want to share that with people, right? Like you want to
Sure.
share that there's a hope for change. It's never too late. I mean, especially people in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s, they feel like they've invested too much time in one career to make a change.
Yeah.
Like how could I ever step out of something that has defined me since so many years. And I see that with my parents, who somewhere they have a desire to move out, maybe let's say into a different country, or desire to move out and live on a farm instead of in the city. So they have these desires, but at the same time they have conflicting desires,
Right.
which
Yes.
are limiting beliefs.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it is kind of coming to that, to realize that we're a three-part being, not a one-part being, you know? We
Hmm.
don't define ourselves as the physical body and this is it. You know, you're born and you die and that's the end of it. And then you start to realize, no, there's this, we're so much more expansive. We're actually pretty vast, you know? And
Hmm.
that's not to say I'm trying to lose weight. I mean, we're vast from a soul spiritual perspective. Um,
Hmm.
and you know, I find it quite fascinating actually to that particular point. When you kind of listen to near-death experiences, because they always fascinate me. You know, that's been part of really is just understanding that, you know, we never die, right? We can, the
Hmm.
physical body will at some point expire, but we never die. This is just a moment in time. This is the blink of an eye. And the whole point of being here in the physical world is to enjoy it. You know, find what your joy is and find what your passion is, because that is exactly what you're supposed to do. Because we're all,
Hmm.
as I see it, this is what I've kind of learned is that we're all, you know, on a unique journey. We're all unique for a reason because we're all single little pieces in a cosmic jigsaw puzzle and we all have a role to play. But when you're going to awaken to that, it took me an awful long time. Um, and the thing that really triggered me was quite interesting, actually, because my daughter, Stephanie, who still lives in America, um, her grandfather, which was the my ex-wife's father, who I was very close to as well, he was the most amazing man, but he'd passed back in 2016. And Stephanie, my daughter, was devastated, and it was understandable because, you know, she'd been so close to her grandfather for throughout her life. And but she kept seeing these signs that he was still around her, despite not being in the physical anymore. And then she said to me when I came back from America, then I moved back out to America again and was living with Stephanie. And she said, "Oh, you know, I want to go and have a reading, a spiritual reading." And I thought, well, yeah, why not? Why not? At the end of the day,
Hmm.
I hope she doesn't get too disappointed because, you know, it's woo-woo nonsense. It doesn't really happen. But yeah, go on. And, you know, just encourage her to go and do it. But I kind of like, I thought, I just hope she doesn't get too disappointed.
Hmm. How old
But
was your daughter at that point?
at that time, she would have been about, it would probably have been about 19 years old, something like that. So she was, you
Hmm.
know, uh, she understood entirely what she was doing, and she was, you know, she could definitely feel it, and she'd seen her grandfather in lucid dreams and also saying very encouraging, really, you know, that he was still around her. And so she went and had this reading, and she came back with this most incredible story because, yeah, her grandfather was there, and the cousin, and then there was my mother who passed in 1981. We obviously
Hmm.
never met Stephanie because Stephanie was born in 1998. But
Hmm.
apparently she'd actually held Stephanie before she was even born.
Wow.
And then, but what was amazing is that while they had lots of messages for Stephanie, they also had lots of messages for me about what was going on in my life at that time, which was quite
Hmm.
stressful for a few reasons. And it was so spot on. I'm thinking, how can this be? So it just made me very curious, and I realized I needed to go and have a reading myself. So my daughter, she picked out somebody to have a reading, and actually that was amazing. That hour that I spent with this lady called Susan Braw, it changed my life because it left me no hiding place but to identify with the fact that I had been completely wrong with what this consciousness journey was about.
Hmm.
And in fact, Susan brought out a book not so long ago, just a few months ago, actually, on Hay House Publishing, a brilliant, brilliant book. And I did interview her as well. But yeah, she's a remarkable person. But the fact is that I was left with nowhere to hide anymore. You know, this was to me now, I needed to know. As a left brainer, then kind of gave me an advantage because I realized I was wrong, but I needed to know how wrong I was. So that began a journey which has been going for nearly 7 years now in terms of understanding the nature of consciousness and the human experience. What is it all about? Why are we here? And so for 7 years now, I almost have steeped myself in identifying and learning, and it's been fantastic. I love my life purely because I understand now who I am to a large extent.
Mhm.
And I know there's a lot more to unfold. I know that what I know is the very tip of the iceberg, but that in itself makes it exciting as well, because I know it's a journey. You never reach the destination, right?
Mhm.
But the journey itself is exciting because you suddenly realize, and what makes it really more exciting as well is that everything is changing around us. The
Mhm.
world is evolving around us. And to understand a little bit about that and why that's happening is also a great time to be able to reach out to people.
Mhm.
So that makes the whole journey exciting to me.
Yeah, that brings it back to Elevated Planet and what you're creating. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, there is this trade-off between staying in the comfort zone, stable income, predictability, and then pursuing what brings us joy, but also involves risk.
Yes, yes, it does. And it's kind of interesting actually because somebody quoted this to me the other day actually, which was that life begins where the comfort zone ends,
Hmm.
right? And that is very true. Putting yourself out there, if you're just purely living in the comfort zone, you're not really exploring what life is truly about. And I find it, it's very tempting, because there's a lot of fear out there in the world today. So the encouragement for people to contract and stay within a defined boundary has got to be quite compelling. And you can kind of understand that. But I do think that there's a lot of triggers out there in the world
Hmm.
today that will awaken people. And I think this is part of the journey that's unfolding over 2025, definitely. But in the years immediately ahead as well. I think there's going to be a lot of events that wake people up to the fact that there's a lot more going on here than we've realized. And there's going to be a lot of people awoken from their comfort zones and start to explore something that is ultimately to be much more magnificent, understanding how incredible we are as humans rather than this small, dumbed down version that we've been fed for our lifetimes. We've been conditioned and programmed to believe we're actually quite small and that we have to reach outside of ourselves for other people to help
Hmm.
us, for governments, for health authorities, for corporate entities, and we need to consume this and we need to consume that, and we need
Hmm.
pharmaceutical drugs to get our bodies back online. There can be certain elements of truth in that, but that's all there is.
Yeah. Yeah, we have given away our responsibility over our own bodies, over our own health, over our own mental well-being, and we've given it to someone that we trusted more than ourselves. So we have given away our power,
Yes,
and that power is exactly what you need in order to do what you desire, because otherwise you are going to get trapped with desires that are not even yours,
yes,
right? Like you get, like you said, the way that you get conditioned is, you have certain ideas, desires about life that are based in that belief system. And as you beautifully said, once you just leave your country, or most likely not just the country, but you move to a completely different place or spend some time in that culture, that's going to open up your mind to see that, as you said, you lived your life in one way, but that's not the only way.
yeah,
And so I love how you said that, because I can totally relate to that, because my travels also really opened my mind, and some things blew me away, like just how grateful I should be to the fact that I grew up in a country where I can walk the streets with a phone in my hand or with money in my pocket without having to think about someone snatching that away from me any minute.
Right.
And so, like these things that I experienced in other countries due to the political situation, due to the societal situation, due to many, many re reasons, I'm not judging the people who are doing that because I truly believe that at the core of every human being, there is the good part, the God aspect, because we have been created by some higher power, but many people call it God, the universe, the creator, whatever it may be. It goes back to that power that you said that we are so powerful, but there are so many cultural beliefs that we have. And it's funny also because each part of the world has its own limiting beliefs,
Yes.
and everybody has tapped into that collective belief. And now it's our turn and task to actually go and learn from all these different cultures about their beliefs, our beliefs, and share it with each other. And there comes social media and all these
Yeah.
platforms where we can learn from each other, where we can understand that we don't have to buy into those limiting beliefs, that we
No.
can go ahead and risk something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is the thing as well. Part of the trick there is to not feel threatened by alternative versions of reality, to kind of like explore them because that's where the richness is. To me, that was when I was working with our teams over in, say, India and places like that, right? Or the Middle East, or the, everybody's got a different version of actually reality. But when you kind of spending time with these people and you're starting to understand where they're coming from, you think, wow, actually, I prefer that to the way I've been looking at things. I'll take that little section there and I'll just
Mm,
be you, but you respect and you honor the fact that people have different versions of reality. You don't need to feel threatened by it. Everybody
mm,
has grown up in a certain part of the world where they've been conditioned and programmed to believe that that version is the version. And
mm,
we're quite often encouraged to feel threatened by people who don't believe the way that we believe and we've been taught to believe. I think this is
mm,
part of a control mechanism. And this is part of thing I found really interesting in recent times actually is understanding what that control mechanism is all about. And I do think that the that 2025 and the years immediately ahead is when we start to have the light shone on that particular darkness because there is some darkness out there. And I think
mm,
that that is empowering. So it's not scary, it's empowering to understand what's happened. And this is not talking about something that's happened in the last few years. We're talking about things that have gone on for thousands of years. But this is now starting to, all the layers are starting to get peeled back now. That light is being shone into the dark. Once
mm,
we start to understand what's happened, why it's happened, and it's not to say those who've been perpetrating the darkness deserve to be hated. They don't deserve to be hated, right?
mm,
We're all aspects of a divine energy, which means that
mm,
regardless of the role that you're playing here, everybody is equally
mm,
deserving of love, right? And that's the other
mm,
thing is that life is so much more expansive because this is not just, it's so naive to believe that we're here alone in the universe, right? To me, that
mm,
is something that, you know, we all, I think most people feel that way, but think, okay, well, yeah, but we don't know. Well, we do know. I mean, we've been encouraged to have these blinkers on that say, oh, there's no alien threats out there. And you start to, when you look at this, you realize that we are surrounded by other life forms that we're totally not conscious of, many of which are very benevolent. Not all of them. And some of them have been on the planet for many thousands of years are not that benevolent, and that's where we're starting to uncover that whole mechanism. But again, it's not something that creates fear. Once you understand what's happened and why it's
mm.
happened, it enables you to step forward. And it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
and that's the
I was
joy of,
completely closed to that idea for a
right.
long time.
Oh,
Yeah.
me too.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. No,
And it was like I needed to travel. I needed to travel to Mexico at that time.
Mm,
I needed to means I needed to travel there in order for me to completely change my belief about what you're exactly talking about. And I met people who shared stories with me of encountering um, certain beings like
mm,
I cannot really name them as such. They encountered them and their life shifted in a dramatic way.
mm,
And I mean, I if I can just share the first person that comes to my mind, his name is Miguel, and he is from Mexico, and he actually um, encountered there were three lights
mm.
behind him, and he was driving on the highway in New Mexico,
Okay.
and he was driving with a few friends, and they were driving and looking in the side mirrors of the car, and they saw these lights. And first they thought that these were cars.
Mm,
And then when the lights didn't really match the car, they thought it might be motorcycles. And
right.
then but the lights started to merge and the lights became all one. And then they were like, okay, like this cannot be uh, a motorcycle, it cannot be a car. Then what is it? And his friends got kind of scared, and he also didn't know what was happening, and so it was such an intense feeling that they all had because they didn't know what was happening, and he went. My voice is slipping away. He went to sleep that night, and he had a dream where Archangel Michael, and his name is Miguel. So Miguel is
Mm,
Michael in
yeah, yeah.
in Spanish. And he came to him and he pretty much gave him a movie, like a screenplay.
Mm,
And he never like had any experience of making something like that. But when he started drawing,
mm,
it's like looking at a yantra, like it's not a picture. It's like an energy that you can feel
right. Yeah.
from those images, and I could clearly see that this was something much bigger than
Mm,
like he didn't learn it, he didn't study it, and here he was the perfect example that he channeled
right.
something into the earth, and yeah, it was incredible. And I mean, there's so much more to him. I hope to have a podcast with him one day and for him to share his story because uh yeah, Mexico for me was like it completely changed the way that I perceived reality. I mean, I
Yeah.
was already stepped into the spiritual path, and I was very identified with the yogic path, but this idea of another life force, another like other than human beings, that there's something out there was very difficult for me to
Yeah.
even listening to you, I was like, I wonder how people perceive that. Even today, I feel that there's still a lot of people who I don't know how, because it's even in the major news, it's not hidden anymore.
So tell me about the moment when you realized that you were involved in a retrieval of non-human technology, alien tech.
So it became very clear the first time we recovered something that was non-human in origin, that was precisely what we were dealing with. Our communications changed. Our communication process and procedure was modified. It was also clear to everyone on the team that what we were dealing with was something that was unexpected versus expected. And then just visually looking at the object on the ground, you could tell that it was extraordinary and anomalous. It was not human.
What did you see?
I saw an egg a white egg.
How large was the object?
I would say approximately 20 feet, plus or minus a little bit, about the size of a large SUV.
How did you know that that egg-shaped object was non-human in origin? How do you know that we don't have top secret tech that is shaped like an egg?
Right. Well, I'll tell you that because of the reaction of my leadership structure and because of my experience working in that capacity, everyone involved was convinced that what we were seeing and dealing with was, in fact, exotic in its origin. I'll also tell you that during this process over the last couple of years, it's been confirmed to me by ranking members of the UAP task force that what we were working with that night was in fact an HI, and it was not a unique experience. The egg, as we're referring to, is known by, and there have been many others that have encountered this type of craft in our atmosphere, outside of our atmosphere, broad day, nighttime, all over the place. There's another craft that we recovered that I can talk about, and that craft was what we referred to as an 8-gon. An 8-gon is basically a disc-shaped object that, when viewed from the top, has 8 different symmetrical sections that are delineated by some form of ridge.
So it's an octagon-shaped disc.
Yes.
Had you ever had an experience like this before?
No. This is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life I'm about to share with you. As I get closer to this pick site, I start feeling odd. I start feeling extremely emotional. I felt like something connected with me. I felt like something had tuned in to me and my soul and was providing me some sense of guidance on what to do and how profound what I was doing was. And it was so overwhelming that I began to cry.
But still people have that tendency to feel that we are the only ones. And what I love about the yogic story is that Shiva doesn't have parents.
Right.
He came from a different planet. Like there is no history of him.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, it's that's, and again, that's part of this cross-cultural kind of mix, right? It's when you learn so much and you think, okay, well, that just sounds like sheer fantasy, right? And you can kind of look at it. You can dismiss anything like that. You know, there's a lot of skeptical people out there, and you know, a degree of there's healthy skepticism, to be honest. I mean, that's not always a bad thing because you do have to be discerning. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation. You know, there's a lot of people out there trying to manipulate the version of the truth. Now, you are the sole arbiter of your truth. That's the way it should be. Don't just take somebody else's word for things. I can tell you my truth, but I'm not going to ask you to believe my truth. I think, but if it sparks something, if it sparks curiosity, then ask questions. You know, anybody that wants to contact me at any time, John Drew at elevatedplanet.life or use our website, elevatedplanet.life/contact page. You can drop us a line there. You know, so I'm completely open. And I do understand that you should be discerning. Now, you know, Mexico, talking about Mexico, is just a very special place. You know, it's where you've got so much of that Mayan kind of knowledge that came back from the Atlantis times, where people carried that forward. The pyramids that are out there, the Yucatan kind of peninsula, and even going down into Guatemala, Honduras, and all that area where we get, there is so many sacred sites. There's so much there that is incredible, and that all then going into South America as well. It's a magical place. But yeah, there's so much to know and there's so much to understand. But to my mind now, I'm excited about the fact that there is going to be disclosure at some point, which is a little the problem with disclosure at the moment is that the way that the government will run it, there's a fear agenda behind this, right? So you can have the alien threat story, okay? And you can have,
Hmm.
how are we going to defend ourselves against the alien threat? That's going to come up.
Yeah,
That's going to be one
movies,
of the
right?
ways it will be presented, which is why
Right
it's
from the movies.
important. Yeah, which is why it's important to kind of research it for yourself. And then you start to understand, actually, the biggest threat is humanity to humanity.
Mhm.
And is not the alien threat at all. It's the
Yeah,
agendas that are out there trying to get us to
yeah.
turn against each other. You know, it's interesting actually. There's a fellow called Rory Duff who's a biogeologist or a geobiologist, which one way around. I mean, the guy's a genius, um, but one of the ways he described this was he explains this through a story, which is that there's the king who's in the castle and he's looking down at his people who are beginning to revolt against him. But he has his advisor there, and his advisor saying to him, the trick is not to fight your people. The trick is to get your people to fight each other. That is what's going on in the world now. We're being encouraged to dislike each other, to be fearful of each
Mhm.
other, to need to defend ourselves against each other. Whereas
Mhm.
in reality, what we're moving towards is the polar opposite of that. What we're moving
Mhm.
back to. And this has been the way that life has been in the past. If you go back 13,000 years to the previous cycle, we lived with unity consciousness. But at the moment, what we have is duality. You know, we have the duality of the mind, we have the polarity, we have polarity thinking. Things are right or they're
Mhm.
wrong. It's black or it's white. It's this and it's that. And I think that once there's a lot of teachers out there who show us how to become more heart based, because that's a unity consciousness. That's saying that, okay, we understand, and this is the basis of it, is that we're all individuated sparks of a single creative force, right? So we're all part of a divine energy. And we're all out here having our own individuated expressions and having our individuated journeys because that's how it's supposed to be. But we're all part of the same thing. So when we're attacking other people, we're attacking ourselves. And it doesn't matter what the
Mhm.
religions are. It doesn't matter what the faith is. It doesn't matter what the sexual orientation is. We're
Mhm.
all individuated expressions of a single consciousness. I mean, how exciting is this when you start to realize, well, this is my version of the truth. Once again, I would say if you regard it as deluded nonsense, then that's fine because that's where you are in your journey. And my version is this, right? I'll share it quite freely. But at the same time, I do encourage people to take nothing at face value, explore it for yourself. But once you start to dig under the surface and you realize how, what we were saying earlier, Stephen, about how magnificent we are as human beings, we are only just scratching the surface of how magnificent we
Mhm.
are. We've been kept small. Now you start to open up to realize, as we were talking about earlier, the chakras, the fact that we have this soul architecture that Jole, my business partner at Elevated Planet, she does all the guided meditations and she's wonderful.
Mhm.
She's fantastic. She creates these guided visualizations which help you to kind of like, you know, clean out your chakras, clean out your energy body and just become this a stronger, better version of yourself, ready
Mhm.
to sort of face off to the world. I'm just filled with gratitude because I love this journey. And the more I have uncovered, the better I enjoy this journey. So, you know, bring it on. It seems as though, like, now I'm 64 years old. Every year I've had has been better than the one before. So imagine how
Mhm.
fantastic it'll be by the time I'm 95, right? Truly living the dream.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I agree. And there's one thing which comes to my mind is talking about the limiting beliefs and that whole having an idea how your life should be and having an exact plan to each step, and then opening up yourself to the universe, to the cosmos, to the larger self, not the physical self that, as you said, dies. Because, yes, the reason why we believe that if I turn 50 or 60 or 70, that we are not able to pursue our dreams is
Mm,
because we believe that we are dying, so we don't have enough energy left. but our body might not be physically capable to do certain things, but our energy is so vast that we can do what we can reach, we can have whatever it is that we wish to have, because the reason why we have those desires is because we were born to have what we want to have. We were given those desires. And I'm talking about the desires which are true to you, not the desires which you have been conditioned to have, the desires
Right.
that are something out there in order to feel a certain way. That's a desire that it has been placed. But I'm talking about the desire of doing what you love, of having what you value,
Mm.
and that includes material things, that includes whatever you feel that it is that you truly want to have. And even when it comes to, like, there is a certain judgment in the spiritual world, and I'm kind of really tapping into that, where there's this belief that once you become spiritual, then how are you going to keep the material with you? So there's a hesitation of people who are in the material world to bring spiritual aspects into their life because of that management. Like, once you accept that there's something out there, there's so many things which change, right? Which
Mm.
you have to change about your belief system. And that's scary. So I think that's why there's still a window left. I would call it the window of ignorance. And
Yes.
that window of ignorance, it's still a blessing. Like, bless those people who still have that window open of ignorance, because they also help us to accept that it's their choice. It's their time will come when their time is ready. And that
Yes.
since we are certain that this is not it's a temporary experience, but in a larger scale, your soul or your energy body or your higher self or the God aspect, whatever you want to call it, is continuing, right? Like, even in physics, we say that energy can be created, but it can never be destroyed.
Right.
So since we are energetic beings, and it's as simple as looking at your brain, looking at your neurons, looking at how your body works, like your body, it's a neuronal network.
Yeah.
Like, what's a network, right? Like, it's communicating like a Wi-Fi network. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a miracle to be alive.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I'm grateful every day for this particular journey. And to your point, I do totally honor the fact that I share my truth, but I know everybody is on their own individuated journey, and that needs to be honored.
Mhm.
So when people are skeptical and they don't get it, yeah, absolutely. If I wind the clock back 7 years, I would have thought this was deluded nonsense. So I'm not that far away from the way that I used to look at these things. But one of the things that I do realize is that what it is really about is following your joy. What is it that brings you
Mhm.
joy? Because one of the things that, again, this is the misaligned programming and conditioning, is that when we are educated, where we find things that we're not very good at, we're encouraged to double down on those things we're not very good at.
Mhm.
And, which is okay to a point, because you do need certain skills to get through life. But beyond that, the reason you're not very good at certain things is because it's not what you're supposed to be doing. There are certain things which light you up, which means that you feel the joy. And who knows
Mhm.
what it might be? It could be something very humble. It could be something that's very specific to you, or it could be
Mhm.
something that's very expansive. But again, I come back to that cosmic
Mhm.
jigsaw puzzle. Everybody has a unique piece. So it's kind of like understanding that you have the power within, and learning how to go within is very important. That's what Jolene does for us. She just kind of like says everything you ever need is within this. And
Mhm.
she talks about the chakras as well, about it's like we come into this life with luggage, and the luggage, each of these suitcases is a chakra, and it's there to be unpacked in life. So at certain times,
Mm.
certain more information comes to the surface, and it's different for everybody. there's a book called The Soul's Gift, which written by Robert Schwartz, that I have down there, which is one of the ones that helped me to understand a lot more about the nature of consciousness and the human experience. Because what it says is that before you're born, you have a life planning session or whatever it is. So you have your soul team, you have this, you have that, and you decide, probably based off past lives, what have you done well? What have you not done so well? Where do you want to develop for soul growth purposes? So you create this, and different people will come into your life at different times to present you with different challenges, which will give you the opportunities for growth. And some of the times that people come into your life and actually are not very nice to you, but that's because that's what you wanted. So quite often the challenges are opportunities for growth. And once you start to think of life in that way, you then become less fearful. And when things happen which you would regard as bad, you start to take a step back and ask the question, what am I supposed to learn from this experience? Rather than pushing back against it, denying it, you've got to allow it. You got to allow this experience to happen, because the problem is, this is again one of the things I've learned, is that more you suppress things and ignore things, the more they're going to come back to you. You've got to allow it to move through. And sometimes these are pretty dense emotions, but this is part of your journey. So you come in with a plan. You don't know what that plan is, because as soon as you're born, the veil of forgetfulness drops down. That's what makes this human experience so challenging, is that we come in with a plan, but we don't know what the plan is. But it will unfold over time. There's this luggage that's packed, as Jole would say, which is the unfolding of these suitcases, which is packed with full of these things, just ready to unfold at the right time. But keeping that,
It's
yeah,
like,
it's amazing. But yeah,
it aligns perfectly with Kabbalah. Have you heard about Kabbalah?
Kabbalah. Tell me about Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, it's a ancient wisdom. It's basically an ancient universal law,
Okay.
which has been written, or not written, I would say. I would rather say channeled by Abraham. And
Yeah, yeah.
Abraham is the father of pretty much all of the religions that we have, like the Islam, Christianity. It even has a lot of aspects that are found in the Vedic scriptures. So even that as well. And so Abraham channeled that law, and it's exactly what you said. Like the baggage, we come with a certain baggage, and we have to unpack that also, not just like how we might tend to think, okay, so the spiritual baggage is connected to a chakra, and we have to unpack that. So unpacking that also means going through challenges. It doesn't all
Yes.
just mean everything is easy. No, there's a lot of darkness in order for the light to be revealed. And so
Yes.
that's the Kabbalistic way of looking at life, is that we are a vessel, and the light of the creator, which is the creation, the however you can call it, God, like universe, energy, it is that compounded energy that has created everything. And so that light shines always, 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 always. But we as humans have chosen to come to this planet Earth to come without the light of the Creator within us in order for us to experience the darkness, but still always remember that the light is always there.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what's happening in your life, what kind of challenges you're facing, you always remember that you have access to that light at any point in time. And the only thing that you have to do is to keep yourself open, to have your vessel ready in order for you to receive as much light as your vessel can hold. And so the way that you do that is to go through the challenge, to go through the pain, to focus on not being reactive is pretty much what a lot of this is based around.
Yeah.
and to always choose from a place of the creator.
Mm.
Whatever decision you make, whatever you do in your life. And Kabbalah, I just started learning about it maybe a month or 2 months ago,
Okay. Yeah.
and it completely, radically shifted my mind. I mean, I say that now again, like I've been exposed to deep spirituality with living with a master who I would say is one of the most powerful beings I've encountered in my life. When I met Sadhguru in person for the first time, I was not receptive at all. My vessel was completely closed, and I was not able to perceive something
Mm.
within me that I felt like, okay, I need to continue this. But somehow he made his way back to into my life after traveling to Mexico and Colombia and seeing and exposing myself to something that I just couldn't believe as possible. He made his way back into my life, and I mean, what I've seen around him, the energy that I felt when he just not even stepped inside the room, he just made his way to the room, his intentions being placed right there, and you just felt that there's some larger energy which
Mm.
is entering your field. So I can say that I definitely spend time working on myself in all the ways, like whatever meditation, yogic discipline, and routine, and focusing my whole energies into the spiritual path. And here, yet I was identified with that way. And that way is the way. And even if my soul has a desire to explore something which might not align with this way, even then I would judge myself for even considering that something else will work because this has worked so good for me. And I'm so grateful that this has come into my life and it has really helped me to come to the place where I am right now. I mean, the magnificent changes that have happened because of the discipline, because of the yoga, the meditation, everything, it was a blessing for sure. I needed that. I needed
Yeah.
that. But now there's a point in time where I'm leaning more into the intuitive side instead of following a certain structure and guideline, which again is beautiful and worked. But I
Mm.
would now there is a time where I'm more like flowing with what I feel and with how things are, and I feel just much more aligned. I just feel much more in tune, in harmony with
Yeah.
myself and with the people around.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that opening yourself up to be guided and for your intuition to flow through. We we featured someone, I think it was back last May, a fellow called R.J. Spinner, and he was one of these who came back from very close to death, but he knew he could cure himself. They thought he would never walk again, he would never be able to function again, and here he is, like just in a short space of time, he healed himself. And been, what he said is that when we think about this physical vessel can hold so much energy, right? If you think about a soul energy, when we are actually here in the physical, about this is according to RJ, about 2.5% of our wisdom, our knowledge, everything can reside within the body. 97.5% will exist within your higher self, your soul, which is all accessible to you, but you need to ask. Because if not, if you only ever stay within, right, or if you don't ever look to do as you say, like you do your meditations, you do this, you do that, you're connecting to the rest of you, right? And when you think about that, if only 2.5% of your, everything you need to know is in here, 97.5% is out there, and you never make that connection, you're actually very
Mhm.
limited in terms of who you are and who you can be. But the thing is, this is a free will planet. If you don't ask, nobody can insist that you've got to have this, right? They can't force you to take something that you haven't asked for.
Mm.
So part of this journey is allowing that intuition to come through, because this is you connecting through yoga, through meditation, through whatever it is that lights you up again, because everybody is different. Some
Mm.
people, there's certain disciplines that they which are things that they don't resonate with them, and that's fine, because if it doesn't resonate with you, that is not your journey for this.
Exactly.
Something else.
Exactly. Yes, yes. And if you want to reach the entire world, right? Like that's not what I aim for, but what I feel is that consciousness has to reach the entire world, not one philosophy. And even if it's not a philosophy, even if it has transformational tools, if it has truly remarkable ways of opening up the human system to that energy, but there will be a certain number of people who might just not feel drawn to it in that particular way. And so is the beauty of creation is that there are many different expressions of the same energy, and we can embrace whichever one resonates most with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the way it's supposed to work. You know, there's a reason why there is so much diversity on the planet, and diversity is a strength, not a weakness. The fact is that everybody is different for a reason, and opening yourself up to understand. And here's the thing, right? So one of the things you said is that you were drawn to us because there's some little intuitive hit or something that came through,
Hmm.
and other people have said similar things. And same way that I have been drawn to other sites, other teachers, books,
Hmm.
authors, is fantastic. But I kind of know now that it's almost like there's a virtual tap on the shoulder and say, okay, right, now you're ready for this author, right? This is a series
Hmm.
of books that you've got to read now. Now, I don't physically hear that being said, but quite often retrospectively, I think, oh yeah, I can see that was part of the journey unfolding for me.
Hmm.
So we get exposed sometimes to things that don't resonate, but there's a reason why, because that
Hmm.
actually is helping you to understand why this is your path, because you now realize that this is not your path. And you
Yeah.
have to experience things. You have to know what you don't
Exactly.
want to know what you do want.
Yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful. And it's funny how maybe in one part of your life you're like very clear about that. Let's say with business, you're very clear, okay, I know now I'm going to pursue what I truly want. I won't settle down for less, but there might be other areas in life like relationships or let's say spirituality where that doesn't apply. And so I love what you said. It helps me also and being able to communicate what is true for me and what I authentically feel has to be communicated. And then everybody out there who's listening, they should always decide for themselves if what
Yes.
they're listening to is supporting them in their growth and
Mm.
that's something that they won't want more of, or if that's not supporting them and then that's it. Like just let it go. It's not part of your journey.
No,
And so yeah, I I'm grateful that yeah I encountered you and I also allow myself to lean into it, to follow that intuition and to just connect and it's beautiful. I mean, just this hour of speaking
for
to
sure.
you, it was
Yeah.
beautiful
No,
to bring it all together.
yeah, and I'm very grateful because, like, you know, for because again, since you reached out just last week, and I'm saying thank you. I know that this is kind of something that's meant for me, as much as we may be meant for you. You helping us to achieve what we're supposed to achieve. I mean, I have big visions for Elevated Planet in the future, and there's a reason why this is all supposed to happen. Now,
Hmm.
I don't know how that unfolds, and I don't need to know yet, right? Because what happens is that everything unfolds for you at the right time. This is what I'm kind of discovering.
Hmm.
And Steven from Twisted Reality, kind of knocking on the door last week, was always supposed to happen because you're
Yeah.
helping us on our journey. We will help you on your journey. And this is the joy of collaboration, and it's the joy
Yeah.
of joining those mutual energies together to
Hmm.
create something bigger and more vast. And it's a beautiful thing, something to be celebrated. And And I've got other people that have been brought to me in a similar, very similar kind of way. And you know, this is a complete blessing. And it's just helping Elevated Planet, because Elevated Planet is its own living entity as I see it. You know, it's kind of like when Jolie and I first spoke about this, and it was interesting. Like, I'll just very briefly to explain how we got together. But when I was living over in America, and I had this spiritual awakening care of this mediumistic reading, that suddenly I've got all my relatives coming back to me. I realized they've always been around me. And so I kind of thought about life very differently. So then I started to kind of create my own little spiritual community. There was somebody I worked with, there was somebody who's written a book, and I went to the book signing. I bought the book, and I got to meet this lady that had got this spiritual practice going. So I started attending her spiritual practice. She was really good. She was doing the yoga stuff. She was doing Reiki. She was doing meditation sessions. I learned a lot through her.
Mm.
But then there was something really bizarre happened, and I still, anyway. She came, I was meeting her for coffee one day, and she says, oh, it's something really strange has happened. She said, I had some friends who were down at the Carlsbad Caverns, which is this place in New Mexico, which is this whole series of caves and caverns that are, you know, maybe 60 miles worth. And it's a national park. And they said that on their way out, they saw this lady whose name was Kathy. They say they saw her going in with this man into the caves. They both saw her. They both knew it was her, except she wasn't there. She was back in California, right? But they were so convinced they just got in touch with us. Right? We've just seen you. We've just seen you go into the caverns. So she meditated on it. And then when I'd met her this day, she said, I'd realized, yeah, this was kind of something that's happened, or something that's supposed to happen, whatever it is, it's a vision. Said, but I've realized that the man that they saw me with was you. And I thought, really? Now, to me, this was just a bit too weird, because I'm in a spiritual journey now, but caves, going into a cave with somebody that I don't really know very well, and this is not an easy journey she said, we've got to go to these caves. And I'm kind of like exploring it. I'm thinking, this is about 1,000 miles away. It's going to take us a day and a half to get there. It's going to take us a day and a half to get back. To go and visit a cave, what? It was just too much. So I kind of like parked it. I thought, I'm not going to do that. And then about maybe a month or so later, there was not just Kathy, but there was all these other people came forward and said, look, there's this vision. They've done this meditation session, and people have seen this. You've got to go to these caves. I think, what? I've got to travel all this way to go to these caves, and there's some reason I've got to go. This is just like too bizarre. So I ended up going to Mystic Journey Bookstore in Los Angeles, in Venice Beach, as it was at the time. It's now in Santa Monica. But they had different readers and healers. And I thought, I really need to understand this a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I went to see who was available, because they had like psychic readers and healers, as well as crystals and all the rest of it. The beautiful place. I really love Mystic Journey Bookstore. And there was a lady there who had, like, I just read through her resume thing that was posted, and it was about the fact that she had been steeped in things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Egyptian mystery schools since the age of 12. I thought, okay, well, I've been thinking cave systems. This is somebody that she's the one. Anyway, so I had a half-hour reading just to come in and off the streets, and that was Jolie, you know, and it was just amazing, because like I sat there, and one of the first things she said to me, she said, oh, by the way, the caves are calling. I just thought, what? So the caves are calling. She said that there is some sort of a message there for you. And the irony of it was that then it turned out that, yeah, maybe I was supposed to go to these caves, but there was something about I needed to do this alone for whatever reason. There was something else was. So I booked it all, and I was going to go. And this was back in early 2020 that this happened. And I'd booked the flights, I'd booked the hotel, I'd booked the rental car. I was going to do this. And then as it got closer to the day, the COVID thing was starting to happen. And I was due, because I literally was leaving my job at the end of March, early April, to come back to the UK. And this was approaching that time. As it got to the day I was supposed to be flying down to Texas to go to New Mexico and to begin this pilgrimage. All of a sudden, the flights all started getting cancelled. And, so what I had to do in the end was to actually bring my transatlantic flight back to the UK back a week early, which was the day I was supposed to go to the cavern. So I never got to the cavern. So I don't know what that was about. But what that did is that it aligned me with Jole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elevated Planet came along maybe a couple of years later, and we did it by, again, Jole's connection to the creator when she's a theta healer. And it's kind of, she's a clairvoyant theta healer, all these kind of things. She's brilliant at what she does. So she has this connection. So when we decided on Elevated Planet, it was like a bunch of names. And we said, no, the energy for anything with mystic in is not going to be right for this. Da, 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 da. And then we get to Elevated Planet. Elevated Planet is the name, right? And it was, the way it was put to her is that Elevated Planet already exists. It's like an idea that's in the ether that, needs to be actualized. So we see Elevated Planet. It's kind of, it's like its own living conscious thing. We're just helping to facilitate this journey, which is magnificent, right? But everything now, what happens is that the right people come to you at the right time to further this journey. And Stevan, you're part of this journey. Twisted Reality is part of this journey. We can be part of the journey for Twisted Reality as well. So I just
Yeah,
love the way this unfolds.
I wanted to say something about the caves because when you were telling me that story, what came up to me was like the caves, it's almost like the caves that we're calling are Jolie.
Right. Yes, yes.
And so like the only thing that you were meant to do in that moment is to lean into it and to make that booking with Jolie. Right?
Yes.
Like it was never the idea for you to actually go to the caves. Like whatever you had to get there in those caves is what you received by just doing one step. Like you almost skipped the
Mm,
steps that you would have to take, like traveling so far, coming back, all that, like going to the caves and all that. Whatever was there for you, you got that by making that step and connecting to Jolie.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I think that's very perceptive of you or, allow something to come through there because I think you probably nailed it. Again, there's no accidents. We meet the right people at the right time. I regard that knowing Jolie and being, Jolie and I having the friendship that we've developed over the years is a blessing. It's a blessing, but
Hmm.
it's something that was always supposed to happen. Our life paths were supposed to cross. And that's how
Yeah.
they were supposed to cross. As you say, it's a funny thing, but a lot of the main people who come into our life, when you wind back the point where you actually, that intersection took place, it's often such a random series of
Hmm.
events that made that happen. But it makes you realize actually a lot of things that appear random are just not random.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do believe what you said in the beginning, the soul contracts, signing a it also like it aligns with Kabbalah.
Mm,
It's the same. So somewhere like I'm hearing something from you and I'm ex being exposed to this ancient wisdom at the same time. And now it's coming together. And it's for me also to lean more into it, like in the same way that you leaned into okay, like these people are telling me something that I don't know what to do with it, but here's something that I can do, and without going to the caves, without making a journey, let me make one step. And so that step is this connection that we're making here. It's another step.
yes.
So yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, thank you for your time. Thank you
Yeah.
for everything. It's yeah, I'm looking
Thank you.
forward to see how the audience perceives, how the audience receives this. I'm very excited. I'm definitely curious to hear about whoever, is listening to this
Yeah.
right now. Let us know down in the comments what you felt like, what resonated with you most. Is there something that you feel um, that you're struggling with right now? Or is there anything that you maybe also overcame, like where you were before and where you are now? I think both of us are very interested in hearing your stories and connecting to you. I'm looking forward to be part of Elevated Planet community support in whichever way I can. And for those who are listening, yeah, make sure to check out their page and see if you enjoy the guided meditations, which I did enjoy quite a lot. That's how things started. And then I started to hear like you and Jolie as a mix, like how you share things and then how she comes in. And I think the beautiful balance that you guys have is exactly what you said in the beginning, the first time you mentioned it, is that you have that like masculine, logical, certain perspective, that energy that you bring in, and then also the way that you live for 40 years. Of course, there's a certain something that you learn, something,
Yeah.
certain lessons that you went through, and then there's Jolie on the other hand, who has the feminine encompassing energy, which just has a different feel to it. And
Yeah.
so I agree. I agree. The way that you guys align with each other and how things are going. I wish that you re, I I I wish that you, both of you, whatever goals that you have, whatever desires that you have within you, that they are going to be fulfilled.
Thank you, Stephen, and I truly, truly appreciate this. And anybody that does want to join this Elevated Planet community, we do have an email distribution list. We send out a newsletter, and we welcome contributions to that in terms of content as well. Because the community is not just us being preaching at people. We're just sharing our version, and for you to decide and to share your wisdom as well. That's one of the joys of it. It's kind of like with you, Stephen, it's coming along and you contributing your way of looking at the world as well. And we have other people that are doing the same. So it's growing and it's growing and it's growing for a reason. And I think the time is now for this to develop. And thank you. This is the first, I hope, of many such interactions. And I do look forward to sort of working with yourself and Twisted Reality, and
Yeah.
which way this is going to develop, I'm excited about it.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Twisted Reality, by the way, is came to be as a I felt that reality, the way that we perceive, the way that we live it right now, a lot of people, not everybody, of course, but the majority of people that I've encountered in my life, the way that they have perceived reality always felt twisted to me, because the way that life was originally created, the way that life was meant to be, and when I say meant to be, I'm talking about human connection to the planet, to the earth, the one who has created, given life to us, given birth to us. So that connection is just missing in a lot of people. And so that's where I felt that the way that we live, the way that we living inside walls,
Yeah.
having light, and like a lot of things that we take as that's just how it is, that's how it's meant to be. A lot of these things are just being questioned by the channel. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's just the way that I see it.
Yeah. No, it's great, and it's a gift, just a gift to the world. These things, again, you get inspired for the right reasons, right? Because there's a message there, and there's
Yeah,
a message that will reach certain people that they need that little trigger at that right time, and people's soul growth expands as a direct reason of that. So
yes.
fantastic.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen, and
Yeah,
thank you everybody who's going to view this, and appreciate your time and all those comments, as Stephen said. Absolutely, really would
yeah.
be love to hear them. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Stephen.